turn to college football because a lot is going on, a lot of moving parts week to week with the College Football Committee and the rankings. Let's just talk about, first of all, we got some betting advice that we want to get to, but let's talk about the SEC and the ACC and how the market realignment is just sort of treating those two conferences.
Yeah, so every week we're really looking to track, the odds makers' opinion on these conferences and where they're changing things week to week. Now, last week was really interesting because they were really implying there would be around 4.5 SEC teams in the playoffs. So we're teetering from that, 4, maybe 5. If we don't get an Indiana, maybe we get that 5th SEC team. Now, after last weekend's games, now it looks like more just 4 SEC teams pretty solidly. And you're thinking, okay, well, where'd that half go? It went to the ACC, actually, okay? Clemson looking great really just helped the merit of the entire conference. Seeing this resurgence of Clemson, although they kind of put them down in the beginning of the year, losing to Georgia, they've kind of been bringing them back up. So now you see 1.5 teams implied from the ACC. So before we thought, they only want one. They only want that ACC winner. Now we're getting that 50-50 coin flip that maybe the ACC runner-up would also get into the playoffs. That's a really interesting situation for someone like SMU, who's actually minus odds before going into this week. Now they're around plus 108, which is telling SMU, you probably do need to win that ACC championship, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well.
Very interesting. SMU, a pretty cool story, but not as cool as Indiana. Talk to me about the market and Big Ten Indiana.
I've gotten a lot of backlash on media this week for my takes on Indiana. Now, I like Indiana. The model actually likes Indiana more than odds makers. We have them rated higher in the power rankings, but it's still outside the top 12. My problem with Indiana is calling this the 5th best team in the country. I don't think you should be called the 5th best team in the country just based off your 10-0 record with the 103rd strength of schedule in the country. I don't think you should be called the 5th best team in the country if you're 12.5-point dogs on the road to Ohio State. Nobody else, probably 11 of the 12 teams, would not be 12.5-point dogs that are in the college football playoff right now. Maybe Boise State, obviously, but you look at Tennessee's, Georgia's, obviously 1 through 4. You're 12.5-point dogs to Ohio State. How are we calling you the 5th best team in the country? And the public is steaming that to 14.5. The people at home who love Indiana are the ones believing in Ohio State. So my problem with Indiana is if they go 11-1 in bad style, if they lose to Ohio State poorly, I don't think they should just automatically be in the playoff as an 11-1 team. Now, if they keep it close with Ohio State, that's a completely different story because they had one big test in Michigan, a team that could make you look vulnerable, and they kind of passed it. They won, but it wasn't very pretty. So if you can keep it close with Ohio State, obviously if you beat Ohio State, that's a whole totally different story. But I need to see style points and I need to see some integrity showing the strength of schedule in tune with power rankings.
Passionate plea from Mackenzie Brooks. All right, let's keep it going real quick with Indiana, though, because there are ways to bet some of these teams as it relates to the college football playoff or some of their games coming up next. And by ways to bet, I mean smarter ways to bet. Mm-hmm. How are we handling Indiana as it relates to betting them to make the college football playoff or having them cover the spread against Ohio State?
So for Indiana believers, right, if you really think Indiana is going to make the college football playoff, their chances to make the college football playoff are directly correlated to keeping this game close with Ohio State, as in cover the spread against Ohio State. So that's what you should be betting. Instead of betting minus 350 for Indiana to make the playoff, take the around minus 115, the actual normal market price, just to cover the Ohio State spread, because that is essentially their ticket into the playoff. So it's just a better price for essentially the same outcome.
Okay, so let's kind of stick with that theme as it relates to Ole Miss. They play Florida. They've got a playoff number. They've got an outright number or money line number against Florida. How should we be looking at Ole Miss?
This is for people who, I'm trying to give you the best way to get, the best bang for your buck here, how we can use the market to our favor. Now, if you are a Florida believer, if you're into the DJ Lagway story, if you love the resurgence the second half of the season from this team and you think they can upset Ole Miss, you should be taking Ole Miss just not to make the playoff. You can get Ole Miss at plus 330 not to make the playoff because Ole Miss would need to win out in order to make it. So losing to Florida State essentially crushes those chances. So instead of just taking the underdog money line for Florida State, it's not as pretty as that plus 330 you get for Ole Miss not to make the playoff.
Plus 260 versus plus 330. Seems like pretty simple sports line math to me. All right, how about a betting strategy on the team you just mentioned, SMU?
Yeah, so SMU right now is around plus 108 to make the playoff. Now they're plus 135 to win the ACC championship. Obviously a prettier price there. What the story and the narrative that the odds makers are telling us is SMU, you probably do need to win that ACC championship. We love SMU. We think SMU would win the ACC championship come the time to go and play against Miami. So you might as well get, again, that plus 135 is a lot prettier than that plus 108. And it's the same story because SMU probably does need to win the ACC championship to make the playoff.
All right, now we move to Colorado. A pretty exciting team for reasons I don't even need to get into. It's super obvious. Also, Kansas starting to become exciting, knocking off BYU.
Yeah.
I may have had a very late night Saturday night live bet on BYU, and it didn't come through thanks to some craziness in the fourth quarter. But you don't want to hear that story. You want to hear the Colorado betting strategy from Mackenzie Brooks.
Yes, I know we have a lot of Colorado supporters out there. So again, I'm trying to give you the best bang for your buck here. Don't bet this, bet that. Give yourself a lot better value. Now they play Kansas this weekend. Now the money line there is minus 140. In order to get to the playoff, you need to win out. You need to win the Big 12 championship. Getting to the Big 12 championship, I believe they can win that game. I think the biggest battle that they have between now and the playoff is this game this weekend against Kansas. So if you think they're going to beat Kansas, don't take that minus 140 money line. Take the even money for them to make the playoff because this is probably punching the ticket to getting there because we have them heavily favored against whoever they would play in that Big 12 championship.
I love all of this. I mean, this is like, you mentioned it, like bang for your buck. Like this is how you want to dive into these things. Multiple betting options, take the right one, watch the early edge, dial into SportsLine, and you'll get the right